Hi, Simon.
Hey, Lisa.
How's it going?
Pretty good. I just had a very interesting marketing experience, if you will. I got an application for a credit card with 250,000 bonus points, and I was like, "Wow, maybe I should consider this." And I was reading about all the other great things that they were going to offer me, access to airport clubs and things like that. And I was really like, I have a consulting business. Maybe I should have a separate credit card, keep things a little more managed, separate. My accountant would be happy about that. And then I read the fine print and I have to spend $20,000 in 3 months to get 250,000 bonus points. And I'm just like,
That's too much.
there's no way. There,
And you know what? As a matter of fact, most credit cards give you a point per dollar spent. So it's almost like $20,000. You'd get another, what, 20,000 points from that too? I don't
Yeah.
know. Not
I
worth
mean,
it.
you get a lot of perks too. And
You do.
250,000 points is, like five domestic tickets
Yeah,
almost,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So, in a sense, that's good. But I'm like, what am I? I'm not remodeling. I'm not going to buy furniture for my whole house.
Right.
I'm not paying for tuition anymore. I'm not, uh,
Yeah.
uh,
No, too
I,
much.
yeah, I was
Sorry.
just like, whoa.
Pass.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you don't know who I am, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
This
Oh,
is,
yeah.
it's interesting. I mean, marketing, the segmentation issues, all of those fun stuff. But
Well, who
I,
knows? Maybe it was because, you've established a business and they're like, hey, you
I'm
can
sure it
easily
is.
spend $20,000 on advertising, but
You
yeah,
could,
not
or
us.
I mean, if you had a business where you had to buy equipment or material, or
Or
you
if you
know,
have a drop shipping where you're buying a bunch of stuff and then a customer pays for it, but
right?
you're the interim.
It's
So yeah, you
yeah,
get
like
that
those
money back.
protein bars. Those protein bars. We should buy $20,000 worth of those
Oh
protein bars.
God, yes. Not a sponsor. We're not going to talk about it, but yeah,
No, we're not going
very,
to
very
say their
good. Yeah.
name. But all of this said is sort of like I'm not at a point where I need to really reassess, like, and look at my business. But
Mm,
I'm just not spending that kind of money right now. But
no.
you know,
But that's a good segue in terms of reevaluating your business. And so today we're going to kind of talk about the reevaluating, giving yourself an evaluation of your marketing and like how you might go about doing it. So last week we talked a little bit about the in-house versus outsourcing your marketing, and we kept referring
outhouse,
to
in-house
outhouse.
versus outhouse.
Yeah, in-house versus outhouse. In the doghouse, and we kept referring to evaluate, and so we thought we actually should talk about what that should look like. And so at a high level, and we're going to break down all of these, it's about reestablishing your goals, evaluating all of your marketing tactics and strategies. Are they doing the right thing? Doing a technology audit if you have already established some sort of technologies for your marketing, and then ultimately optimizing, monitoring, and reporting. And this is something that I don't know if you have to do it every year, but it's I think to do it periodically. People will for years just be using the same thing or doing the same thing, and it's good to just step back and
I mean,
reevaluate.
that's actually a really good point. It's like when to do this, and I would say whenever you feel that you're missing either an opportunity, right? Like your competitor, or you just
Mm,
what you read in the news or hear, on the golf course, whatever. It's sort of like that's a good point to like do a quick self assessment of your marketing. And it could be as elaborate as what we're going to talk about today, or it could be just something simple about, your mix of product or your mix of advertising, something like that. I would say the other time, obviously, is when um, there you feel like maybe you're trending down. And again,
mm-hmm,
that's going back to sort of always monitoring your analytics, looking at
mm-hmm.
trends. If you're in your high season historically, and this current year you're flat kind of thing, it's sort of like, maybe something has changed in the market, in the macro sort of
Mm-hmm.
economic space. Like think about everything that's going on without getting political, just the stock market today and things like that. And that might be a good time to assess a change or maybe just confirm that you're on the right track kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true. So some of the benefits of doing this, it might be better alignment or optimizing your strategies, or to your point, just making sure, yeah, we're on track. Because oftentimes you just get kind of caught up in things and you forget to step back and reevaluate things.
I mean, another time again might be when you have team member changes, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you have a resource that's left your organization, or you've met somebody that you think might be a good fit for your organization,
Yep.
um, maybe you want to retweak things a little for that.
You just made me think of another one, and it was based on research that I had done with another company that I was working at and a partner that we had, where we were interviewing customers of our joint solutions.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we found out is that people decided to make a change in their technology and choose us was what I would call exogenous factors. So that's
Ooh,
exo. I know it's
that,
a fancy word that
well,
I learned.
I'm a little worried we're going to have to mark this as not appropriate for children.
Ah, no. Okay. So, but the exogenous meaning external factors. And so some of those were job change. The
Right.
pandemic was a huge thing that people
Oh.
who were, they were doing things manually and they had to shift to digital. So that was another thing. So there were these external factors that
Hmm.
were requiring them to change. So that's again another time. It's like, did a new competitor emerge? So those are things to consider. But why don't we move on to that one of the first things where we talked about like reestablishing your goals. So how would we go about doing how does somebody go about doing that?
I mean, I think we sort of touched on it. You want to take a look at um, is everyone sort of on your team aligned with your strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously team alignment is important, and I think that's a combination of your existing staff or determining, do you have a gap, right? That
Mm-hmm.
because of change or time, maybe somebody is moved on. We talked last time about generalist, right? Maybe someone has really identified a specialty. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have a new gap, right? You need to fill somehow. That could be one of those things.
Yep. Another thing I think is has your budget shifted dramatically?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because either you're like, oh God, we got to cut costs, or it's the other way. Maybe there's you've decided, oh, you know what,
Bountiful,
yeah, exactly. We've been more, success. We've had a good year, and so maybe we need to like, hey, maybe we could start to spend a little bit more money in marketing.
right?
Okay. Anything else on this? Because that might
I,
not. I mean, I think
I mean,
reestablishing your goals is pretty easy.
yeah, and I think it's like identifying that what we just talked about, the timing and everything like that.
Yep.
Um, so I think related to that then is like we talked about is marketing tactics and strategies, making sure you have alignment. So is your plan and strategy and how you execute on it actually helping drive your business forward, right? Because sometimes people work like you just said, you might do the same thing for 10 or 20 years, but what your strategy isn't relevant anymore. I'll give you a good example. I think most people know I work for a nonprofit, and there's a trend where print media and print sending out mailers and newsletters and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. It worked for the older generation, the boomers and all that. And then as we get into Gen Xers and more current, the paper is not performing. So it's something where you really have to think
I
about strategy.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. So it doesn't necessarily mean old versus young. It depends on your industry. So how many
Sure.
times do you get a credit card application in the mail? And We just talked about that at the top. And I would say that they keep doing it because it's successful. So it really depends on and you can
Oh,
personalize things.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But what I guess my example is specific to my area, like
Yeah.
nonprofits
Mm-hmm.
traditionally did mailers to drive campaigns
Mm-hmm.
for donations and things
Hmm.
like that. And it's just that
Maybe it's not working
generation.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're trying to target in this
Or
scenario somebody younger, then maybe it isn't the right thing.
I mean, the other thing is that it could be that the style of the print, like you're saying, print is still effective for somebody, obviously, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I don't know, but it would be interesting to see if print credit card offers are performing as well as, let's say, digital ads or things that show up in social media, or what ultimately is converting.
Well, okay. I'm gonna do a little sidebar for a second because a thing that you get in the mail versus an email, I would say those are comparable, offline versus online, but it's personalized. It's going to you as a person. The
Mhm.
ads and social media, I feel like those are broad. So it's a little bit harder
Sure.
to do the precise. You, Simon Hunt, have this much credit that we will extend to you based on
Yeah.
you and all the financial information we know about you versus like some generic, like sign up for, see if you qualify or whatever.
But
So it's going
I
to be a
do
little
think
different.
it is, but I think that segmentation these days, again, thinking about the current capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to only get better, right? They're going to get
Sure.
to that sort of goal of marketing, nirvana, whatever it is, that digital can be one to one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you said, it's segments and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, I feel like one to one, and it happens when you log in, right? If you log into something, they'll make you offers based on what they know about you, right? But that, I think, will expand. So that's my
All right.
prediction.
You know what? Personal, good job. We should talk about personalization. So, note to self, let's make sure we get into a little bit more detail about that personalization
Got it.
versus sort of general marketing.
Not today.
Make a note of that. No, make a note of that. But let's get into the key considerations for the kind of aligning marketing tactics and strategies because
Yeah.
there are a lot of things to consider. And to me, you and I think that this should be our, so we talk about it's mostly marketing as our tagline. I'm sorry, as our name of our podcast, and from tangents to tactics is our tagline. However, I would say always be measuring is a close like
Second.
second
Yeah.
or third, yeah,
Third.
on there. So here's the thing: usually, not usually, I can't be that general. Often, though, people that are just starting out and they don't necessarily know what they're doing, like a billboard, my billboard example that I love.
Yeah.
If you can't track and measure something, like I feel like you're just throwing money away. So the
Well,
very first thing is tracking and measuring.
tracking
Yes,
and measure, and in my mind, measuring isn't any value unless you analyze it, right?
true. Good, fair point. So all of those things together. So it's great to
Yeah.
track, but if you don't do anything with that, then
Exactly. If you're not looking at that, and that was sort of what I was saying earlier, you have to look at trends. Like you can look
mm-hmm.
at last week, but if you don't compare last week to the month before, to the
Yeah,
year before at the same
exactly.
time, you don't have, you're not really going to understand what's happening.
I feel like I say this all the time, and I must have to say it another way because I don't think people hear me, is that it is not valuable to look at a date range and a single number. It's like, I don't, that tells me nothing. It
Right.
absolutely tells me nothing. So, can you rephrase that in another way so that other people can hear it?
I think it's important to not be single metric minded.
Okay.
And even though you may know that your goal for e-commerce conversion is 10%, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not comparing this week's e-commerce with last week's, with the last year, with an average over the last month, whatever, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't make the comparison, you
Mm-hmm.
don't really understand the direction.
Yep.
So single metric mindedness will get you in trouble because I think you're so focused on that week or a
Yeah.
very or a set, like you
Uh,
said, time frame, instead of again looking at it more broadly,
mm-hmm.
and then figuring out like what are the things that are happening. I mean, we could have a whole nother analytics
I
conversation,
know, and
but
we have, but it's still there's still always more to talk about. I'm going to give one other tip in regarding to tracking and measuring and analyzing is
okay,
it's better to have well, I don't know if it's better, so you push back on me on this, but having a percentage versus an absolute number is a little bit helpful. So, okay, for example, if you say, "Oh, I got this many clicks on my website," and pretend it's a trend, from the last 3 months, and I see it, daily trend of clicks. But if I have half the people coming to my site and my clicks are flat, well, that actually means that twice as many people are clicking than they did in the previous earlier
correct.
time frame. So, um, I do you think that that's important? I mean, I think there's
I
times
feel
when
like
the
you need
individual
both.
number, yeah, you probably do.
I
Yeah.
think you need to look at both. And to your point, like, is it quality or quantity? Like, what is
Mm-hmm.
happening, right? Maybe you're finally honing into the right audience. So you're
Mm-hmm.
actually going to have less impressions or even whatever the initial stuff, but your conversion rate may be maintained because you're actually talking to the right people. So
Yep, exactly.
there's nuances. I'm going to make one other plug here. If
Okay.
you're a high schooler or going into college or in college and you are at all interested in creative, but also into math and things like that, there are going to be so many jobs for analysts or some sort of it's the new world order when it comes to numbers. So it used to be I'm an accountant, I'm a finance person, but now if you can understand a customer and you have some sort of bent of marketing or creativity, doing being an analyst, there's such a need to have people with analytic skills and
Mm-hmm.
dedicated analysis. I think it's going to be a great job opportunity. With all of the data that we have and intelligence out there, you still need humans to look at stuff.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, you can use AI to help you with that too, but I still think you need to have a brain to form opinions and
It's
validate
just
what
like
the
what you
AI
said.
says.
Like we got AI will tell you this many clicks. It might even tell you as compared to a prior week, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still not going to know the nuance, and it's still not going to be able to like necessarily make a correlation to other things that are happening. So,
Yeah.
all
All
right.
right, moving
So,
on. Other
well,
considerations.
yeah, I mean, obviously you want to look at your structure. Where are you sending people? Are landing pages working? Is your web content fresh? Like, is it updated? Is it out of
Mm-hmm.
date? Right? How many blog posts have you read and then you realize it's from 2015 or
Mm-hmm.
2019 and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
anything pre-pandemic, I would argue is I would discount it at least half, if not
Oh,
more, because everything changed, right? We're
I
resetting.
know.
So look at, is your site updated? Is your content updated? Is it relevant to your current audience? Again, we talked a lot about relevancy.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
other thing I think that you want to ensure is that over time, just like our podcast, they can start to take turns and twists into other directions. And you want to make sure that everything is sort of in consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
My designer friend Karen always says you can never go wrong with consistency, right? So if you're
That's
having
true.
a design
Yeah.
dilemma or a content dilemma and you don't know like, does this work or this would go with a more consistent approach because
Mm-hmm.
your customers will be able to follow along, right?
Yep.
Anything
I
else? What else would
yeah,
you?
I'll add one thing, and it's a little bit technical, but I do think we should address this. So the other thing that people typically start with when they do marketing, let's say we've got multiple channels, we've got social media advertising, search advertising, email. That's good enough for now. And what people usually do is with all these marketing tactics, they just look at the last thing somebody did before they say purchased.
And
And
what is
that's
that
called
called?
last touch marketing attribution. And it's pretty rudimentary. It's like it's not giving any credit to anything else. So, like, let's say you've got Facebook ads, but search is what's getting that last click. Well, that's kind of obvious because you tend to use Facebook for more awareness oriented
Hmm.
tactics, and it doesn't, some though do have it to be more kind of direct response. But search, people are literally telling you that they want to buy something, or
Or
they're like
research, or
research it.
yeah.
Yeah, their intent is very clear. So it's, for the most part, search does tend to get weighted more heavily. But if you can start to move to whether it's more algorithm oriented, which is more sophisticated, or you just decide I'm going to pick a attribution model that looks at everything along the way, you can say you can do it manually, and manually where you say I'm going to weight 40% of the credit to the first thing somebody says, gets, uses, sees, touches,
Clicks. Yeah.
clicks, and then I'm going to wait 40% for the last thing that they did. And then all the things in the middle, I'm just going to divide it up by 20%. Like it can be that kind of rudimentary. And then once you
Mm.
set up something like that, it makes you go from just sort of, okay, I'm vaguely tracking things, to being just a little bit more sophisticated. And then
Yeah.
again, this like algorithmic is the kind of the gold standard, is what you want to get to, but
And don't forget,
evaluate that.
yeah. And don't forget that you can have things repeat. So, in other words, they might not respond to one email, or they might open it, but they won't click it. But the second
Mm-hmm.
email, they open and click. Or they visit the website once and they don't do anything, but then they visit the website again and they
Yep.
convert, right?
Yep.
So you can actually have the attribution across, like, it takes two visits, or it takes
Mm-hmm.
an
Yes.
email and two visits. Like,
Mm-hmm.
becomes formulaic,
Yep,
hopefully.
exactly.
So what else?
Okay,
Anything else?
not in that. So let's move on to kind of evaluating tools or technologies that you might
Mm,
have. And
yeah.
so, what are some of the things that you might start with?
I mean, I think you can take a look at anything that you have from a sort of contract perspective, or relationships with vendors. You want to take a look at commitments. You might have a contract for a service coming up for renewal. So that might be a good time to assess that particular piece is working or not working for you, or do you need more focus on it, more resource, or is no one using it, you're paying for it, kind of thing, right? So I mean, that's obviously, make sure that you're getting benefit out of the money you spend on tools, but even if it's $20 a month, right, that seems cheap, but
Yeah, but if you're not using it,
I mean, I'll give you another good example. But there are lots of different options for making your schedule available to people to book their own meetings. So
mm-hmm,
people outside your organization can't by default see your calendar, but there are
mm-hmm,
tools that let people, you can expose essentially certain time slots to people. And if you're in a very simple situation where you're just like, I just need to let them know I have availability on Mondays and Wednesdays. It actually built into, let's say, Google Calendar is now an appointment feature. It's not
mm-hmm,
super sophisticated, but it's free, right?
right,
But you might be spending 10 or $20 a month on another
the booking,
solution.
mm-hmm,
Yes, it has more sophistication, but maybe you really in the end don't need that kind of level of detail. And that's again, you
yeah.
know,
Well, circling back to the what I mentioned earlier about exogenous factors, this is one. It's like a new technology has come out, and so it's like, oh, okay, maybe I need to evaluate this other technology. Um, the other thing I would say though is it, it's more of a problem if you have a larger organization, but make sure you kind of check in with other people in the company, because maybe there's something that you're like, we don't use that, and then it's like, oh no, I actually need this for this very important thing, but I
right.
only do
That's
it once a
true.
year.
That's true.
You don't know, so just to make sure that you kind of check in with departments, if you
And maybe
will.
one more thing is, like, Lisa and I do this all the time. You can try stuff for free. There's
Yeah,
usually, and you
definitely.
can, like, I know both of us were using ChatGPT for a long time free, and we've realized that we're getting so much benefit out of it, and we needed a little more capabilities, the ability to put larger amounts of text in and things like that, that it was worth it to
Mm-hmm.
upgrade to a paid service. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of opportunities. Play again, we've said this before, maybe this is our fourth tagline, but don't be afraid to experiment with some of these
Mm-hmm.
things, these tools out there, because they can be really beneficial. Or you may be like, I'm never going to really use this, right? So
Yeah. And actually, the other thing, so we said tools and technologies, but the other thing, I would say services is related to that too. Are
yeah,
you
what would you?
working with, yeah, are you working with somebody that you're like, well, actually, I'm not getting a lot of value out of that. So just
Oh,
evaluate that. And you did talk about contracts, and oftentimes maybe that is with with a vendor that you are a service provider, if you will.
right.
So just
And
make sure that you're getting value out of it.
absolutely,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
I'll give one little example too. So the nonprofit that I am on the board of from,
Yeah,
I don't know what the preposition
part
is.
of,
Part of, yeah.
participate in.
Yeah. We are going through a process of reevaluating things. People have been picking up technologies and saying, "Oh, it's free. We're just going to bolt this on," and people are, "Wait, what? How do I use this?"
Oh, yeah.
So that's another thing is like we're going, wait a minute, like is this the best way for us to operate this very ad hoc and knee jerk reaction? So we're just evaluating thing and trying to look at things more holistically. So we're in the
I
process of doing that
I
now.
totally I echo that, because I know situations where one team or one department uses one set of tools, let's say for instant messaging, and then you
Mm-hmm.
realize you can't talk to half the other company because
We're
they
having
either
that
haven't
too.
adopted it or they're using something totally
Well,
different.
we have people using WhatsApp, and there's like a big chain of a bunch of people that are using WhatsApp, and the board is not on that at all. And we're like, well, we don't know what the operations team is working on or communicating. We don't have any visibility into that at all. So yeah, we're evaluating that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so then the final thing we kind of alluded to was the optimizing, monitoring, and then repeat this whole process over and over again. So how do you? What's your like? I don't know, advice or point of view on maybe staying organized, motivated, if that's what you need when like reviewing things. Do you have
I
any
mean,
thoughts on that?
yeah, just that you, uh, there's an expression now, I can't remember it, but you basically have to look carefully at all of your activities, your spend, your resources, your
Mm-hmm.
plans. And it's not maniacal, but you need to be like willing to cut stuff, right? You shouldn't,
Ruthless
oh,
prioritization.
thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Was it
It
okay?
was a priority and being ruthless. Like, you have
Mm-hmm.
to think about being willing to no sacred cows, as we used to
Mm-hmm.
say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just continue to make sure you're focusing on your tracking trends, insight, use that data driven decision making to um, make change and things like that. What else would you add?
Well, I was just thinking that we really haven't spent much time on this, not this episode, but on the podcast in general about process.
Mm,
And that is something that I think you and I have so much experience with larger companies, smaller companies, and everything in between, where we know how to identify, oh, going from like a small company that starts to grow and then you can't just do things ad hoc anymore.
mm,
You need to have processes for it
right.
and establishing those processes. And again, you and I could like, we dust off things we've done at other companies because we're like, oh, this is what worked before. And then maybe you try this process out and see how you need to make adjustments for your particular organization, your industry, and so forth. But going back to this notion of optimizing, monitoring, and repeating, I think you have to look at processes as well. It's like, are those
Absolutely.
all
That's a really good
working?
point.
And
Yeah.
then that's how you can kind of track year over year, any kind of progress that you're making is like, these are the things that we follow, and it kind of helps us map to our marketing
And
goals.
I think that goes for the whole saying, like, we're just doing this because we know it works. Like, no one's given it any sort of analysis or thought or second guessed. And I am sort of dealing with a situation where we track a lot of these activities, but we track them in three different places, and it's sort of like, it partly because of the technology. Some teams don't have access to this or that, or we have to pay for one system, the other one is free. There are definitely reasons, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right approach. And so I think after you get an understanding of the flow, and you and I feel like are pretty good at finding efficiencies or inefficiencies and calling those out when we work with people, because we're just like, keep it simple, right? And keep stuff focused and things. So
Yep. So the only thing, I guess, to kind of summarize everything is, we've talked about the ways to go about doing your I don't know, audit, if you will. I don't even know if that's right. So just to reiterate, reestablishing your goals, kind of making sure that you've got everything, things haven't changed too much. Evaluating your tactics and strategies, and probably processes. I think let's throw that in there, since that's
yeah,
something we kind
sure.
of thought about. Doing the kind of technology or tools, services audit. So vendors as well would be included in there. And then kind of tracking all of that so that you can then start to fine tune it, optimize it, monitor, and report back out onto it. Now, I will say we've referenced a lot of other things in this episode, because we've talked about these things. So the marketing attribution, we do have a deep dive into marketing attribution. So take a look at that. Either watch that or listen to that episode. We have an episode about planning,
Hmm.
and then other kind of broader topics. So always, everything that we've talked about, we try to make that's something that is lasting, and so we've got a lot of good resources there. Anything else you want
Yep.
to add?
Uh, no, I mean, if we talked about things, I know at one point, and you were talking about awareness, or this one was more about conversion, and
Oh
it's like,
yeah,
if
we
you
talked
don't
about the
understand
funnel.
that, our funnel, yeah, there's a whole
Yep.
episode on funnels. So
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting, and we're at episode 24 right
Mm-hmm.
now, and to me, none of marketing and these marketing activities and activations and things like that, none of that uh, is in a silo, right?
Yeah.
There's element. It's, people think marketers, oh, you just have to come up with a cute headline and a nice picture of a dolphin. It's like, no, it's a little more complicated than that, and it's about bringing all these different things together to really have an impact.
Love it.
So I mean, I would love if anybody out there has done a marketing sort of tune up or check or audit and things like that, and you want to share that. We have, it's mostly marketing.com, and on there you can ask the host a question. You can just drop us a note. It would be really fun if you're listening to us on YouTube. Just put something in the comments. Like, we'd love to hear what you've learned doing a check in and things
Listening
like
on
that.
YouTube and watching on Spotify.
Yeah, whatever. I think you probably
uh,
can watch us on Spotify.
I think you're right, actually. And you
So,
can listen. You can listen on YouTube as well. I'm just
yeah,
teasing.
I know you
Uh,
are.
from tangents to tactics.
It's mostly marketing.